The night the devil walked across. Devon. On the morning of February 9th, 1855, people across parts of Devon, England, woke up to find something in the snow that should not have been there. A long trail of hoof-like prints, appearing in town after town, across roads, gardens, fields, walls, rooftops, and other places witnesses thought no normal animal could have crossed. The case became famous almost immediately, and it was documented in contemporary newspapers, including the Illustrated London News in February and March 1855. Wikimedia Commons, Plex 1. This is why the story matters. It is not just folklore told decades later. There were contemporary reports, witness letters, published sketches of the marks, and later source collection work built from surviving documents. The surviving evidence is messy, contradictory in places, and imperfect, but that actually makes it more interesting, because it means we are dealing with a real historical disturbance, not a polished campfire legend invented afterward. Wikimedia Commons Plebis. According to the early accounts, the tracks looked roughly like the imprint of a small cloven hoof. In some places they appeared in single file, which unnerved people even more. Villagers claimed the marks stretched through multiple communities. Reports described them showing up in gardens with high walls, on housetops, and near or through obstacles that should have interrupted any ordinary trail. Later, retellings exaggerated some of this into one neat supernatural path across all of Devon, but the deeper document review suggests something subtler and more disturbing. Many tracks were genuinely reported in multiple places over one or more nights, and enough people saw enough similar marks to trigger countywide panic. Academia. That panic was immediate because Victorian England still lived with a strong supernatural vocabulary. People did not just see odd prints. Many believed they were seeing evidence of something diabolical. That is where the famous name came from, the Devil's Footprints. The phrase was not invented by modern paranormal TV. It emerged because witnesses and readers themselves reached for the darkest explanation available. Academia. And this is where the story gets even better for your format. The documented truth is strange enough without claiming more than the evidence allows. One later researcher, Mike Dash, compiled surviving source material and made an important point. The famous version most people repeat today is too tidy. The prints were not all identical, probably not all laid in one single perfect line, and may not all have appeared in one single night. That does not debunk the event. It means the real event was a wave of related sightings, reports, and local observations that got fused into one legendary nightmare. In other words, the hoax explanation is too simple, but the literal Satan crossed Devon in a straight line. Explanation is too simple too. The real history sits in the more uncomfortable middle. Something happened, a lot of people saw enough of it to be alarmed, and no explanation fully closed the case. Academia naturalists tried to solve it even in 1855. One theory blamed badgers. Others suggested birds, cats whose tracks had thawed and refrozen into hoof-like shapes, donkeys, or even later, a balloon dragging equipment. Each theory could explain part of the mystery. Bird tracks might account for rooftops. Cats altered by freeze-thaw might explain the hoof-like look. Donkeys can sometimes place their feet in a near single line. But each explanation also breaks somewhere. A balloon does not convincingly explain neat trails through hedges and pipes. Birds do not explain the repeated hoof-like shape well. Cats might account for some prints, but not the scale of alarm across different settlements. Dash's conclusion was not this was supernatural. It was more frustrating. There was likely no single source for all the marks, and yet the total event still resists a fully satisfying solution. Academia. That is what makes this story powerful. The unbelievable part is not merely the image of hoofprints in the snow. It is that an entire region briefly experienced the same impossible mood. Fields, lanes, churchyards, gardens, rooftops. Ordinary winter places were transformed overnight into evidence scenes. People stepped outside expecting weather and found omen. And because the reports came from the middle of the 19th century, before viral internet fakery, before creepypasta, before Photoshop, the unease lands differently. These were people trying to describe a physical trace in the landscape using the language and logic they had. What they left behind is not proof of the devil. It is proof that something sufficiently bizarre happened to force respectable newspapers, clergy, naturalists, and villagers into the same conversation. Wikimedia Commons +1. That is the prove part. We can prove there were contemporary published accounts. We can prove there were illustrations in the Illustrated London News in 1855. We can prove later researchers found letters, sketches, and source documents tied to the event. What we cannot prove is the final cause. That unresolved gap is exactly why the case survives. It is historical, documented, and still deeply wrong in the mind. Wikimedia Commons +1. So, if you want the clean closing line for the piece, use this. In February 1855, Devon did not prove the devil existed, but it did leave behind one of history's best documented moments where the ground itself seemed to testify to something impossible. Wikimedia Commons +1. If you want, I can turn this into a full paradox and prove voiceover script with a darker hook, retention beats, and a title stack.